Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. Now, I was thinking today that young workers who graduated when the pandemic hit have yet to set foot inside an office. And instead, they've also been recruited and onboarded online, with many yet to meet their colleagues in person. And although that might feel incredibly daunting and overwhelming for many people of a certain age listening today, the next wave of workers to hit the workplace, known as Gen Z, actually have no intention of ever working full-time in an office on a permanent basis, and are much happier with hybrid working and splitting their time between the office and working flexibly in any location. So today, I want to talk about onboarding new staff in a hybrid workplace and how businesses can ensure that they carry things such as technology, office culture, and all the small things you do around an office, like coffee breaks, water cooler moments, and 5 p.m. beers. How you bring all that into things. And I've got the perfect guest lined up for you all. His name is George Dunnett, and he's from a company called Zellis. And we're going to have a conversation today about how good onboarding processes, whether they be physical or digital, should actually reflect and understand the needs, expectations, and indeed frustrations that come with a fresh face. So buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to the UK so you can join me and George in conversation now. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Hi, Neil. Thank you very much for having me on. My name's George Dunnett. I'm the Chief Product Officer at Zellis. We are the UK and Ireland's largest provider of HR and payroll software. And as head of product, what I do is bring together all of the input from what our customers' needs are and what our strategy is to help them with their needs and help turn that into product features and functionality that's going to add value to our customers. And then my team work with our engineers to get that built and then get it out to customers as quickly as we can.
And a question I always like to begin with in any of the interviews here is, how did the worlds of HR, payroll software, technology collide for you? How did you get here? Can you remember the moment that lit the spark in you, where your passion for tech came from? There's got to be a story there, right?
Oh, it's a long one. So let's see how we start. So I guess, like I think a lot of people that you have as guests on your show, a lot dates back to childhood and investing technology there. So, and then that merged later with sort of the career direction I went in. But I mean, I think back as in primary school, I remember particularly we had these BBC computers with a laser disc on, which had, I'm going to date myself a little bit, but it had the Doomsday Project on it.
Oh, God.
And it had video on it and stuff. And this is in the 80s. So this was pretty advanced. And I was pretty amazed by that. And then I had messed around with the Amstrad and the Amiga and later a PC that I had. And that was all fun. And then I spent my A-level maths classes coding Snake on my graphical calculator rather than paying attention to the actual class. And then, so that kind of has always been a slight bug in me. And then my career has gone a few different ways. I started out as a lawyer doing mergers and acquisitions. And then I spent a long time, did an MBA in France and then came back and was a management consultant for 11 years and really focused on technology, digital transformations and business services. And that, I guess, is where it started to bring together the technology and the HR elements. But all along the way, I had I guess I call it laziness. And I think there are some benefits to laziness combined with a little bit of trying to be creative. I've always looked for ways where I can do some less work by making a process or a way of doing things more efficient. Back when I was still a student, I had a holiday job working at a big company in Norwich where I grew up, just doing clerking work in accounts payable. And we used to get in these big boxes of mobile phone receipts. And the job was to go through, send them to the right person so that they could identify which were personal calls and which weren't, then add that all up, take it off, do the sums, and make sure that they paid for their personal calls. And it was all very manual and on paper. And I figured out that actually get all of this digitized through Vodafone and do it all by email in a kind of simple little app in, I think it was Lotus Notes back in, and eventually put myself out of a job, but I timed it to be the end of the holidays, so it was okay. But I think that's always been what's found really interesting about using technology to help me be lazy, if I'm slightly jokingly honest.
Oh, and it never ceases to amaze me how that BBCB computer with 32K of memory,
Yep.
inspired a whole generation. We must be of a similar age. I'll date myself too, but I lost track of the hours where I used to play text-based adventure games where it was literally open door. It was just a DOS screen and you were typing open gate, enter tavern. Do you remember those games?
Yeah, I remember that. And then I remember that, and then moving on, eventually got an Amiga, and how amazingly advanced that was, because they came on a floppy disk, or sometimes 11 floppy disks, and every minute you were switching disk around. Good old days, eh?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, well, we could have our own podcast on that topic alone. But that path led you to Zellis, which, as you said, is around HR and payroll software. But can you tell listeners a little bit more about the problems you solve with tech and maybe what makes you different from other solutions out there?
Sure. So, well, Zellis has been around with this name for about 3 years, pretty much since I joined the company. But our heritage was part of a bigger, larger company and dates back 50 years. And where we are, I think I mentioned, we pay millions of people each month and each week with our software across the UK and Ireland. And about a third of the FTSE 100 use our software for payroll and does payroll and HR. We also have our own outsourcing service for pay and HR, so we can handle that work for our customers. And that means we're quite hands-on with how the technology gets used as well. And that gives us a lot of great experience. And what we do is a variety of things within Zellis. We manage all your payroll, which is actually very complicated to work out how much people should get paid, take off the right tax and get it out to them. We'll handle all of your HR needs. So all of the basic things like all your records, your name, address, your bank account, but also booking holiday, doing your expenses, making a requisition for uniform, all sorts of different things like that. We manage your benefits for you. So if you offer people private healthcare or the cycle to work scheme, things like that, we have a whole marketplace for that. And we also get into onboarding, background checking of people. And once they're on board, we help with kind of way to recognize people a bit more. I think we're going to come on to talk a little bit more around how things have changed in the hybrid world, but we have a whole platform to help people recognize each other's colleagues virtually for the great job they've done or how they've helped each other. And then lastly, we do provide a lot of analytics to our customers. Often people are the biggest expense. They're usually somewhere between a third to 2/3 of the expenses of most companies. And often it's a bit of a black box where that money goes and how people are performing. And so we have a whole analytic package that can help open up that black box and give a lot of insight to our customers, help them make better business decisions.
And I'm glad you mentioned onboarding and hybrid there, because I invited on the podcast today to talk about the onboarding of new staff in the hybrid workplace and how businesses can ensure they carry things such as technology, office culture, and all the small things around office life, such as coffee breaks, water cooler moments, and 5 p.m. beers. So to set the scene, how much have you seen onboarding change in the last 2 years? Because one of the things that I've particularly noticed is we've had people recruited, onboarded, and compliance training, and enter the business all actually without even meeting their colleagues. So I'm curious how you've seen that change and the impacts of that.
It is amazing, isn't it? I mean, I counted up. I've hired 8 people over the course of COVID, and several of those, it's been months and months since I met them. As you say, you've interviewed them and they onboarded them and they've got started, and you feel like you know them fairly well. Yeah. And speaking to customers, it's a very similar position with them. It's all had to be done virtually, and we've had to adapt our processes to send out all of the tech that they need to their houses, and had to really try and build relationships with them virtually. And I think we're kind of, COVID has been a disaster for many people. I think we're lucky in a way that it didn't happen earlier, because we didn't have the technology then of Teams and Zoom and the like to be able to have the video interaction that we have now. But it still doesn't really replace the in-person experience. And so I think technology can come a long way to help create the connections, embed the culture that's really important when someone joins. But it requires more thinking about to try and get the best out of the technology than the more kind of in-person onboarding experiences that people are used to.
And I'm curious, it's a pretty big question, but what are the secrets to onboarding new starters effectively when not in person? And what role does technology play in that? You've mentioned the 8 people there that you've been through. So did you have any experiences of what worked and what didn't?
Yeah, well, there are lots of elements, aren't there?
Yeah.
I think you've got to structure it all really well. And when you're in person in an office, it's pretty obvious what's going on. You see someone sitting at their desk looking a bit lost and who's just arrived, or they're sitting in reception, and you know instinctively what needs doing. If you can't actually see someone because they could be the other side of the country, even the other side of the world, and you don't know what's going on, it's very easy for them to slip out of your mind. And so you need to structure your approach a lot more. And that's how we try and help our customers. We have a solution which can show both a manager view and the person being onboarded, the employee's view. And it can talk them through everything that needs doing in a really structured way so that they feel part of the business from even before they join, and they're impressed by how well organized the business is. It really sets them off on a good start. So you've got to start with the basic admin and get that right for the employee. So you've got to talk them through all of the onboarding checks that need to be done, all of the admin and documents that obviously need to get signed. And you can structure that in a really easy way. You can have it all in one place. You can do signing online. You can show the progress and a checklist of what needs doing. And that helps bring clarity to everyone. Then you can sort of take away different bits of anxiety. So if they are coming into an office on the first day, then you can tell them where to go and what to wear and what time to show up and who to ask for. Just basic things like that you might forget to mention, but otherwise people will get worried about on the first day. So that takes away stress and show you're organized. You can share company values with videos and talk about your culture. You can help come up with a whole onboarding program of who are the right people to meet. One thing that I found, a small thing, is that people are often a bit nervous when they join about booking holidays because they want to look keen when they start and not book holidays straight away, but they might actually have a holiday in a couple of months' time that they'd booked in their previous job. And so giving people a way to get their holiday booked in even before they start is something else that we help people with. And then as well, there are logistics like making sure that they've got the IT set up in advance is really important. And you can organize all of that. And that helps both the employee and the manager to make sure they run through everything and have it all very visible, all in one place. And we have a whole package that helps with that. It's very simple to set up, and it links in at the beginning to your applicant tracking system. So you can feed in the details of the new employee without having to rekey it, and then we'll feed in seamlessly to the HR system once they're on board and they're joined. And all of that makes for a smooth process. I think that's really important because with hybrid working and remote work, your touch points with the business become much less about have they had a nice welcome at the front desk on the first day? Have they got a comfortable seat? Is there a pool table or ping pong table in the coffee area? Is there good coffee for a start? Is the office nice, light and airy? Have you got your brand all over the office? Are you doing in-office events? Those kind of ways where historically we used to create connections between people, much less relevant now. And if you imagine someone is sitting at a computer in their spare room at home, much like I'm doing now, then your touch points with the business that you work for are much less. And it's really a lot is about what you see on your screen. So having really good intuitive software that is on that screen, I think can really help make a strong connection between an employer and an employee. And that's really important to help them feel good in their first few days, to help them settle in, to help them understand the culture and the ways of working of a business. And through doing that, benefit the employer by being more likely to stick around, bluntly, and more likely to recommend others to come and work there, which helps bring in other good people and help make them more productive from the off.
And if we go back to even before the pandemic, the cost of a bad hire was well documented, and I would imagine it's even more challenging now. So how can things like, I don't know, background checks before people start help with the transition like that? And again, how important is technology in that process?
It's a great question. Getting a hire wrong can be very bad, and not just for having to replace that person, but for the disruption that it causes internally within your business and the demotivation it can have on others around them, as well as the sort of more specific risks that having someone who's not properly qualified, for example, can bring. Tech, again, can really help make that kind of process really efficient, firstly, and more standardized so you don't forget things, and very compliant. There's obviously lots of legislation around this area, not least GDPR. And so you want to make sure it's very compliant and secure. And technology being standardized helps take away from the randomness of a more paper-based process. And there are lots of checks. It depends very much on the job, but there are lots of checks that you might want to do before someone starts. There's obviously, you want to check their previous employment and get references. You might want to double check their education and qualifications. You'll want to check that they've got the right to work in this job, in this country. And there are big fines if you get that wrong. You might want to do criminal record and safety checks. You might want to check things like their driving licenses. And you might, for some jobs, want to do online media checks. You can check them on LinkedIn to check it matches what's on their CV and what they've told you. You can check what they've been saying on social media. But you've got to be quite careful with things like that. You need to get consent. You need to have processes in place to make sure you're not allowing any kind of discrimination to enter into the process. And technology can really help with all of that by structuring it with standard processes, with checklists, and help make it more by standardizing it, by automating a lot of that and by outsourcing some of it. And we help our customers a lot. It's very much integrated into our onboarding solution to do all of this. And we've automated a huge amount of those checks, automated ID checks and things like that, but also help in a very standardized way, outsource the parts that are not yet able to be automated. And so that's a huge benefit to our customers. In fact, some of them are finding that they can do this on a more regular basis now, like can sort of do an annual recheck rather than just the onboarding check as well. And that gives them a lot more confidence in their people and their processes, especially in sort of sensitive jobs.
And I would suspect that even more important than everything is how to engage and make a new employee feel valued. It is increasingly challenging too. So how do you give someone a taste of the digital and organisational culture when they're working remotely or just a couple of days in the office a week?
Yeah, it's a tough one, isn't it? You really miss out on, if you just go from one call to another on video, you miss out on a lot of the phatic communication of just saying hello and having a bit of chit chat, or the accidental discussion you have around the coffee machine. You also miss out on things like the small reinforcements of culture when someone says, well done for doing something. You miss out on kind of recognizing people for a job well done. You know, if you bought someone a present or you'd put their name up on the board as employee of the month kind of thing, that was a very visible thing in the office. And how do you do that when it's all remote? I think there are some things where you just got to continue doing what great practice was previously of talking a lot to your employees, being really clear about what your culture is as a business, what your values are, and continuing to make time to do that. It means putting in more calls in the diary and the like. But when you have your team meetings, what I do is I start by recognizing all the colleagues who've done a great job over that month, and I gather stories about it. I think stories are, by the way, really important thing to do. We have one of our values is all about working together to achieve great things. And we have stories around that. We have a particular great story about 20 years ago, when our data center happened to be next to an oil storage depot in Hemel Hempstead, which blew up. No one from our business was injured, but it did mean that we lost our whole data center. And how everyone came together at that time to make sure we didn't miss a single payroll is one of the kind of legends of Zellis that we talk about a lot, that helps bring our culture to life. That you can still do when you're doing things over call and remotely, but it becomes harder to remember how to do it. So you've got to try and do that. But I think one of the ways that we try and help our customers a lot with embedding their culture, helping create those that communication, the more ad hoc communication between people and make people feel valued is with our recognition app. And what this allows everyone in the business to do is it's a little bit like a social media feed. They get to thank someone, whatever they've done across the business, write a little note about it, and they can tag in one of our company values about how that person has lived that value. And then they tell that story about what they've done. And they can add a little GIF in and make it fun. If you're a manager, you can add in a little voucher for a coffee or a cake or something just to reward people. And we find that is like a great way of creating connections. So things aren't hub and spoke across the business. They are at every layer of the business. Anyone can thank everyone else, and it's visible to everyone. And so people feel really rewarded. People feel good giving the reward as well. It's an opportunity to thank people and give a little bit of reciprocity for their hard work and help. And of course, sitting behind it is a lot of great analytics, because we can show where in the business people are well connected and where they're not connected. So as an exec, we can think about which parts of the business we want to try and encourage people to connect more in and what we can do for them. So it's quite a lot, I think, that you can still do, but a lot has to be, there are tools like our recognition app that helps a lot, but you have to be quite deliberate as a manager to reinforce a culture that you might not have had to think about too much when people were in an office and things happened in a more organic way, let's say. I think you have to put a lot more effort into it.
And there's been a lot of talk this year about the Great Resignation, and we've all seen what happens if you don't onboard people right and you don't look after your people, don't make them feel engaged. They will move on. I'm curious, though, have you found that if you onboard your employee in the right way, you stand a better chance of retaining those employees and keep them in the business longer? Have you had any experience around that?
Absolutely. I think, everyone says first impressions count, and that's true very much in onboarding as well. The first impression of your business really counts. We can see from some of the data that we gather that if someone gives a high score for the quality of their onboarding experience, that very quickly translates in their first months into a high engagement score with their business. And then if you track those people over a few years, the rate of attrition of them is much lower than those people where they had a poor onboarding experience. And that's great, because they're going to be happier employees. They're going to recommend others, which reduces your recruiting cost. They're not going to leave themselves, which means you don't have to recruit replacements. And they're going to be more productive and actually just make it a nicer place to work for everyone around them. And so it's actually really critical those few weeks before someone joins and the first few weeks after they join. You get that right, and it's a huge benefit to your business.
So for every business leader that could be listening to this podcast today, and HR manager, what should their next tech investment be? Where should it go? Should it be on things like ping pong table, foosballs, multicoloured bean bags, or should it be slightly more high value laptop or a microphone, webcam or ring light? What should they be thinking about?
I guess it's going to depend a little bit on your business. But like I said earlier, I think if people are spending a lot of their time now remote working, they're coming into the office much less regularly, then you're going to get a lot of value back from investments you make in what's going to make people productive and engaged while sitting at home on their computer. And yes, a better computer can help, but that's only going to take you so far. It's going to be what they see on their screen and what they're interacting with all of the time that is going to make a really big difference to people and be the medium by which people engage with their business. And after kind of Office 365 or Google Suite, the next most commonly used software package on their computers is probably the HR self-service system, starting with the onboarding system and then taking into things like holiday booking and expenses. And that's the sort of software that people use all across the business. And that, I think, getting that to be something that is really efficient, that gives people lots of choices, that is really engaging and intuitive, I think is a great way for building a connection with employees and helping set up great processes that build out your culture and that make people engaged and productive and happy. Not to say that a good ping pong table might not be a bad thing if you want to get people into an office. I'd vote for good coffee myself.
I love it. Well, I always ask my guests to leave the listeners with a personal touch of inspiration by sharing maybe a book that has inspired them or a go-to song that just helps them get their head in the zone or a song that's important to them. And we add that song to the Spotify playlist or the book to an Amazon wish list. So what are you going to leave us with today? And is there a story to accompany that choice?
I had an inkling you might ask the question. So I thought about it and I thought, well, what about the kind of indie and Britpop songs from my youth? And no, maybe not that. Or what about a little bit of Beethoven that I might listen to and trying to concentrate? And I thought, not that. And actually, I remembered when I left my previous role, the day I left was a Friday evening 3 years ago, almost to the day, actually, just before I started at Zellis on the Monday. And my wife took me to go and see Hamilton, the musical in London. And I hadn't been a fan of musicals, but this was a great show. And there was a song in that called My Shot, where Alexander Hamilton, he's arrived in New York for the first time. He's young and he's kicking off his career. He doesn't know where he's going to end up. He's an orphan. And there's a song in this song is called My Shot. And there's a line in there going, just like my country, I'm young, scrappy and hungry, and I'm not throwing away my shot. And I thought to myself, cheesy as it was, as I headed into the office for the first time on Monday morning, that I would listen to that. And as I came out of Euston to go into the Zellis office in London on my first day, I listened to that as a good way to G myself up and motivate myself to make a good first impression and not throw away that shot at this company. So really embarrassing tale to relate perhaps, but it's a true story and I think it helped me.
What a great story. I absolutely love that. And man, does that song have an earworm? Someone told me to listen to it once for a very similar reason to yourself. And I did. I couldn't get it out of my head for about 3 days straight.
Yeah, it's a great musical.
It really is. And for anyone listening that wants to learn more about Zellis, we've covered a lot of topics today. So what's the best way of finding you guys online and equally contacting your team if they've got any questions?
Sure. So, the best way to contact me or the team would be through our website, zellis.com, zellis.com. And there you can find lots of information about us and lots of ways to contact me and the team. But you can also find me on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Well, I'll add those links to the show notes so people can find you nice and easily. So much I love chatting with you today about the role of technology and an onboarding process, whether being physical or digital too, and how it reflects and understands the needs, expectations, and the frustrations that come with having a fresh face in the business. But all that wrapped up with your personal story and a great song. Thank you so much for taking the time to share that with me today.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
So hybrid working is changing the business landscape positively. But there are a lot of things that still are often missed and could be tweaked with good technology initiatives. And that can cover absolutely everything from onboarding new starters to background checks, giving someone a taste of the digital culture in your organisation and much more. This is just a conversation between me and George today, and I want to bring you into this conversation and your workplace. You've probably tried things at work. You've probably tried things that don't work. You've probably tried some tech solutions that are great and some that have caused more problems. Whatever it is, I want to hear from you and hear your stories. So please email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn at Neil C. Hughes. And my website is techblogwriter.co.uk. And if you have enjoyed today's episode, I know every podcast host says this, it's so hard to beat the algorithms that send new listeners to shows. So if you have enjoyed today's podcast, whatever platform you're listening to this, if you take a look down and give us a quick rating and review, I'd really appreciate it. Other than that, I'll be ready and waiting for you tomorrow as we make our charge towards 2,000 episodes this year and 2 million downloads. Can you believe that? But thank you so much for listening as always, and until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.